In every family, love begins with yes, but sometimes it's the no that protects it. This is the story of David and Ruth, and the quiet storm that almost tore their family apart. Not through hatred, but through difference. Ruth poured cereal into 3 bowls, humming a worship song under her breath. David was still at his laptop, answering emails between sips of coffee. Their 8-year-old son, Micah, had a new obsession, a video game everyone in school was talking about. He begged, "Mommy, please, everyone has it." Ruth smiled gently. "Not everyone needs what everyone has, son." She kissed his forehead and said no. Micah's little shoulders dropped. He didn't argue, just sighed and looked toward his dad. David caught the look. He closed his laptop halfway and said with a grin, "Maybe for your birthday, champ. We'll see." Micah's eyes lit up. Mommy said no. Daddy said maybe. And in a child's world, maybe sounds exactly like yes. That evening, Ruth noticed Micah humming a tune from the game. He'd watched friends play it online. "Did your dad say you could?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Daddy said maybe." Ruth sighed. That word again, the bridge between unity and confusion. She waited till Micah slept, then turned to David. "Love, I told him no. He's too young for that game." "Ruth, it's just a game," David replied, scrolling his phone. "Don't you think we're being too strict?" She stared at him. In that moment, she realized they weren't parenting together. They were negotiating against each other. Weeks passed. David bought Micah the game as a surprise. Ruth found out when she heard gunshots and shouting from the TV. Her heart sank. She unplugged the console. Micah cried. David got angry. That night, silence filled the house like fog. "You embarrassed me in front of my son," David whispered. "No," Ruth said quietly. "I protected our son in front of your ego." Words turned sharp. Both felt right, both felt hurt. And between their convictions was a boy learning which parent to obey. Micah began testing boundaries. When Mommy said no dessert, Daddy said just this once. When Daddy said bedtime, Mommy said 5 more minutes. Seemed small until his teacher called. Micah had started lying and disobeying the school rules, claiming it's not so important, and that some of the school authorities will change the rules anyway. He'd even told his teacher, "You can call my parents. If one parent says no, just ask the other." Ruth cried in the kitchen that night. David stood at the door, guilt on his face. He finally saw it, the cost of divided authority. On Sunday, during worship, the pastor read from Mark 3 verse 25. "A house divided against itself cannot stand." David's chest tightened. He looked at Ruth across the aisle, her eyes closed, hands lifted in surrender. That night, he apologized. He confessed he didn't like being the bad guy. He wanted to be the fun parent. But in trying to keep peace, he'd lost order. Ruth listened, not to reply, but to understand. "Love. Now I remember this boy I grew up with. His name was Daniel. We lived just a few houses apart, so I saw him almost every day. He was that kind of kid who always had the latest toys, got away with everything, and never seemed to hear the word no. His mom adored him. Really adored him. If Daniel wanted ice cream before dinner, she'd smile and say, 'Of course, sweetheart.' If he didn't want to do homework, she'd say, 'It's okay. You can do it later.' Later never came. And if he wanted a new game or bike, she'd find a way to get it, even if it meant dipping into savings. But his dad was the opposite. Firm, quiet man. The type, not unkind, just grounded. When Daniel asked him for something unnecessary, he'd calmly say, 'No, you don't need that right now.' He believed a child needed to learn limits, that not every desire deserved a reward. So Daniel grew up in that tug of war. Whenever his dad said no, he'd run to his mom, and she'd say yes. It became their rhythm. His mom thought she was showing love. His dad thought he was raising discipline. But what actually happened was, Daniel learned to manipulate them. I remember one day, Daniel asked his dad for a motorized scooter. It was the new thing back then. His dad said, "No, you're too young for that." Without missing a beat, Daniel turned to his mom, whispered something, and the next week, there it was. a shiny blue scooter parked in their driveway. He rode it around proudly for days until, one evening, he tried to speed down the slope behind our street. The brakes gave way. He crashed, broke his arm clean. His mom was in tears, and his dad, I'll never forget the look on his face. Not anger, just quiet pain. When Daniel came home from the hospital, his dad sat beside him and said something I never forgot. Son, sometimes no isn't a punishment. It's protection you don't yet understand. Funny thing, now that we're parents ourselves, I understand that man better. Saying no feels hard, but sometimes it's the most loving thing we can do. Lord, David prayed, teach us to speak with one voice, even when we feel differently. The next day, they called Micah to the table. David said gently, Son, from today, Mommy and Daddy will always talk before giving you an answer. That means our no and our yes will always sound the same. Micah frowned. Even if I don't like it? Ruth smiled. Especially then. Micah crossed his arms, testing the waters. A few hours later, he tried. He went to his dad first. Daddy, can I stay up late to watch my show? David shook his head. Not tonight, champ. School tomorrow. Micah walked straight to Ruth. Mommy, can I stay up late? Without looking up from the dishes, she said calmly. My answer is whatever your dad said. Micah paused, surprise written all over his face. Then slowly he smiled. Something had changed. There was no crack to squeeze through anymore, only love that agreed. Weeks later, laughter had returned to their home. Micah learned patience. David learned leadership. Ruth learned trust. One evening, Micah came to them with his piggy bank. I've been saving, he said shyly. Can I buy my game now? They looked at each other, this time both smiling. David said, Let's check what it's rated. Ruth said, And let's play it together first. They all burst into laughter. Unity, the sound of peace, the smell of dinner, the laughter of a boy who no longer had to choose between parents, because now they chose each other. Parenting isn't about who's right. It's about being one. The enemy doesn't always attack with storms. Sometimes he whispers division into small decisions. But when love becomes united under God's wisdom, even a simple no carries peace. Have you ever disagreed with your spouse on how to discipline or guide your child? How did you handle it, with competition or with unity? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Someone might find healing through your experience. And if stories like this speak to your heart, subscribe to Love and Legacy, where every story reminds us that love isn't perfect, but it's always redeemable through grace.